So good morning, everybody. It's Sunday morning. Lizzie and I are in the UK. It's a beautiful, warm, sunny May day here. The spring weather, at least the bright side of spring weather, has arrived. And we are really delighted to be back with you again this morning after some false technological starts, to be back with you again for Turning Towards Life. And I think we'll probably just dive straight in, but I want to say, Lizzie, how grateful I am for you choosing this source that we're going to look at this morning.
So this source is about suffering. And if you were listening last week with us, we, at the end of the time together, we were talking about suffering and how Richard Rohr calls it a very essential part of being a human being. And it really resonates with me because I'm starting to see all of the ways that we avoid our suffering and what the consequences of that avoidance are in terms of how we can be with ourselves, how we can be with other people. So I'm going to read, and then Justin, we can see how the time feels, and maybe we just read it once this time and just discuss it, given that we've had all these issues, but we'll see. So here we go. This is from one of the messages that I received from Richard Rohr from the Centre for Action and Contemplation, and also his colleagues as well. They rotate. So here we go. Pain teaches a most counterintuitive thing. We must go down before we even know what up is. In terms of the ego, most religions teach in some way that all must die before they die. Suffering of some sort seems to be the only thing strong enough to both destabilize and reveal our arrogance, our separateness, and our lack of compassion. I define suffering very simply as whenever you are not in control. Suffering is the most effective way whereby humans learn to trust, allow, and give up control to another source. I wish there were a different answer, but Jesus reveals on the cross both the path and the price of full transformation into the divine. When religion cannot find a meaning for human suffering, human beings far too often become cynical, bitter, negative, and blaming. Healthy religion, almost without realizing it, shows us what to do with our pain, with the absurd, the tragic, the nonsensical, the unjust. If we do not transform our pain, we will most assuredly transmit it. If we cannot find a way to make our wounds into sacred wounds, we invariably give up on life and humanity. I'm afraid there are bitter and blaming people everywhere, both inside and outside of the church. As they go through life, the hurts, the disappointments, betrayals, abandonments, and the burden of their own sinfulness and brokenness all pile up, and they do not know how to deal with all of this negativity. This is what we need to be saved from. If there isn't some way to find some deeper meaning to our suffering, to find that God is somehow in it and can even use it for good, we will normally close up and close down. The natural movement of the small self or ego is to protect itself so as not to be hurt again. Neuroscience now shows us that we attach to negativity like Velcro unless we intentionally develop another neural path like forgiveness or letting go. Oh, it's a big one, this one. So many things in there.
I'm feeling very appreciative of Richard Rohr this morning, and I wanted to say something about him before responding to this text that he's written. Which, of course, is one way you can come at a piece like this is to read it from inside the worldview from which he's writing. So he's writing from inside the church, and he's often writing for people who are in a big question about what Christianity could be. And he's an amazingly creative, generous, truthful, bold, subversive, kind writer about all of that. And one thing that I really love about him is, for any of us for whom that's not our question, what might Christianity be? He's also asking another parallel, deeper question which contains it, which is, what might human beings be? And here's the thing that really got me this time, Lizzie, with you reading this. There is one view of the universe, which is it's absurd, tragic, meaningless, random. We shouldn't expect too much from it. And as you were reading, I thought that may be the case. Maybe the case that there's nothing apart from us. And this is what I love about what he's writing so much. And then he's saying, really, even if it is the case, it's up to us what we make of it. And one thing to make of it is there's nothing here that can help me. I'm going to be subject to blow after blow after blow. Better protect myself and keep myself very small. And we do that so easily when we don't feel any kind of trust in anything. And it's when we start to, I so know this in myself, when I'm afraid or hurt or ashamed, and in trying to protect myself, I just act in ways that keep that going with other people. And mostly that makes me feel better. It's this weird way in which if the universe feels so unfair and uninterested in me that I'm going to get hurt in this way, I can actually feel a bit better by really showing other people that that's the case, by being that way to them. And his huge invitation to, that's not the only way that this has to be. In fact, we can make the kind of world in ourselves and between ourselves that the great religious traditions point to as a possibility by how we act with one another, without having to wait until we get proof that the universe is organized a particular way that would make that possible. We can just begin. And what else could we possibly do? Like what else would we be waiting for?
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for that, because I know that I forget it so easily. And when I think this is the last thing I'm going to say for the moment, when we come into this conversation, so I've been saying to some people close to me recently, feel like I'm in the midst of enormous confusion and difficulty in lots of ways, like right now, this morning. And I can feel that being in conversation together, being with you, knowing that there are other people around, seeing what we can do to deepen and learning together is already part of what it takes to restore me to some kind of kinder orientation to myself and to the world.
Yeah. And, Justin, when you're speaking of that, I've been really trying to study the thing that you're talking about, which is, what are the ways that I'm acting from a fear, acting from a something underneath that keeps the thing going? And what does it take to, it keeps popping into my mind, that thing that I think Einstein said about the level at which a problem is created is not the level at which it can be solved. And I feel like there's a deepening required, which this conversation about suffering is providing, which is, if I keep going back and forwards with you on this same level because you're scared and I'm scared, and we just stay above the fear, if you like, or from the fear together, nothing shifts. It just keeps kind of perpetuating itself. And in the deepening, which might be, what am I afraid of? What am I avoiding? What am I compensating for? In that deepening, this other world is made, just like you're saying, where I actually have a different path that I could experiment with. And I find these conversations to be that deepening, as in, when we have them, when we're in them, different possibilities open up that aren't just the same old, same old. And I guess that's why I feel so passionately about facing into the suffering, because I think the suffering is one thing that, as we're in avoidance of it, stuff happens that has the world be, I guess, in a shallow part of what's possible as a human being. Like there's a kind of brittleness to this surface layer of acts that come from fear, acts that come from hurt, but we're not willing to acknowledge the hurt or the difficulty because it feels too frightening, or our culture doesn't allow it very well, or people would think we were weird, or whatever that is. It's kind of in the shame realm in a way. And so all the while we avoid and we don't deepen, the same stuff keeps happening again and again and again. And this acknowledgement of suffering, that it's normal, that it's just part of being a human being, it doesn't make us have something wrong with us to be suffering, feels like a really big invitation into the deeper possibilities of what kind of a world that we could make. And the other piece that I feel so passionately about, just on the back of that, is the part where he says, if we do not transform our pain, we will most assuredly transmit it. It's like if we don't go deeper, we'll just keep doing this thing, and then other people will just be in the same kind of realm as we are. Like we're really powerful in influencing the possibilities of others around us by the way that we're being. And that's the bit I feel really passionately about in our work, in our lives, is that if I'm not onto what's going on beneath this, how can I be part of the shift? How can I be part of the deepening of the inquiry as to what it means to be human, rather than just perpetuating the same old stuff that's happened throughout our families, our ancestry, history, society, everything. I think that's why I find this so important, is this kind of giving up of the small agenda, if you like, and deepening into some other realm that makes the world really different.
Implied in what you're saying and in what Richard Rohr is writing is the way that things are is such that most of the time we're not going to be in control of things that we want to be in control of. And it's no good waiting to be saved by something or someone coming along, like a great big parent coming along and reorganizing the world so that won't happen anymore. No, that's one way that we can go, is that exactly keeps it going. This isn't meant to be happening, so I won't turn into it. I'll pray or wait or hope that the world will change, or give up, or resign myself to the impossibility of things. And what's so beautiful about this is that it points us into exactly the way you were saying it, which is also different to the way Richard Rohr was saying it, Lizzie, which is that beneath all of that, there's always a depth to which it's possible to turn. There's depth in us, and there's depth in the world. And one of the things that the depth gives us access to is seeing that we are filled with resources for any number of responses to this situation that we wish would go away, most of which won't make the situation go away. That's not the point. Some of them, sometimes we can, but mostly. And the depths, so it's a little bit like, I think I said this weeks and weeks and weeks ago when we began this. I'm just being reminded of someone who's been a teacher of mine whose work I love, a man called Jamie Catto, has these beautiful Christmas cards which have Jesus on the front and a space for your face. And underneath, the comment says, no one's coming, full stop. God sent you. And whatever your theology and belief system, this sense that in the moments of our greatest difficulty, in the moments when other people are in greatest difficulty, it's us who are here to respond. And boy, do we have. The universe has organized itself so that we're the kind of beings that can tell a different story about what's going on. We can find different qualities in ourselves that we're not been in contact with and in others. That's an amazing thing that's not going to make the hurt go away, but boy, it might make us different kinds of people in the midst of the hurts, different kinds of people to ourselves and to each other. And I'm really with you. I think that's so much of what the work that we're doing, trying to bring to the world, is about, but it's also the work that's really called on for each of us in our lives, in our families, in our communities, in our politics, and all of those kind of things.
And also one thing that you said there, Justin, about, when things get out of control, we either give up or hope or pray or do something. And I think one other thing that we do is that we try and get more controlling. The more complex something gets and the more kind of outside of the realms of being controlled it becomes, the more controlling we can become. Like when my child isn't doing well at school and I feel fearful that for their future, I try harder to make them do their homework, which makes them want to do their homework less because the environment and the panic around it is just horrible to be in. And then it's like this kind of deepening of the grip of control, the less controlled it becomes. And so I think this piece at the end that Richard Rohr talks about with the path of forgiveness and letting go, it feels so radical when you want to just hold things so tightly because you care about them so much, just to kind of exist in a different way than control, which is to allow and to trust and to explore the belief that the universe is benevolent, that life itself breeds its goodness, that we tend towards the light naturally if we are let into that realm of not being controlled and not being maneuvered the whole time. That as a human being, we have resourcefulness, and implicit in someone letting go and not controlling me is that I'm okay. But implicit in someone trying to control me is there's something wrong with me and they need to take it up for me. So I'm really interested in what impact it has on other people, us to feel controlling of them or to feel like we have to make them into something, because implicit in that is that there's something missing over there and that I'm doing something to correct that or something. And implicit in trying to control life is that there's something wrong with life itself, that there's something missing, when maybe there isn't. Maybe if we took our hands off, and maybe if we forgave and just let go, however frightening that feels, what if that goodness would be there when we took our hands off of it? And we would never know that unless we tried it. And so this path just feels like an answer to the question that is the answer that you don't want, but it's there and it's possible.
I found myself wanting to ask you what you think the difference is between letting go and giving up. Because sometimes letting go can sound like giving up. Oh, it's difficult. Yes. I'm trying to change it. I can't change it. Oh, I'll just give up. But that's so clearly that's not what you're saying, I think.
Yeah. So like for me, giving up is happening on the level of a reaction from fear.
Mm-hmm.
So when I give up, it's like, oh, well, fine, you do it then. And it's actually not coming from a level, a depth, if you like, that's genuinely okay with the outcome, whatever that might be. Whereas I think for me, letting go comes from a much more generous space of my own feelings of resourcefulness, that if I let go, I'll be able to handle whatever the letting go consequence might be. Whereas giving up feels like a kind of rejection of the situation. Giving up feels like a kind of passive aggressive, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear, but a passive aggressive F you. Whereas letting go is like a generosity that has trust and faith in it, and also self-contact. I can feel now, just in this moment in the inquiry for me, it's like when I let go of something, I can still turn towards whatever I'm letting go of and smile at it with generosity behind my eyes. But when I'm saying I give up, I kind of turn my back on it.
Yeah, right.
So for me, that's my indicator as to whether because of course I don't always let go. And many times I just throw my hands up and walk away like a brat, like a kind of person having a tantrum kind of thing. So I know that both of those things are possible in me, but I'm learning to see the distinction so that if I do the walking away with resentment, and I think that's kind of what we're saying is in this conversation is what giving up feels like. It's very different to a generosity of letting my agenda go, but staying very present and generous towards what might arise because I've taken my hands off of something and still supporting it in whatever way I could.
It's making me think of the word that was, all kinds of words were coming to mind for me whilst you were talking this way. One was, of course, in the language that we've been using, it's turning towards. So letting go, but still turning towards. So it's turning towards in care, as opposed to in disconnection. And it's a little bit like if you have a child who's crying, one way we can go with this is, and we want them to stop, which itself is a way of exactly this. You can't actually control this, but you could you could try and get a child who's crying to stop, or you could walk away, and then if I say it this way, I can feel in me the harshness and the disconnection and the cruelty that can so easily come from this. Or you can sit with a child who's crying and trust in your own capacity and in their capacity and be present to it. Yeah. And that's what we have to do with our own. This beautiful thing from Richard Rohr is we have to do this with our own woundedness, with our own pain. That's how we turn our wounds from some way in which we're going to keep on withdrawing from the world and just going to the world into a way that we're going to be in, he calls them sacred wounds. So sacred relationship with the world is exactly that move. I can't change this, but I can be here. And I can bring everything I have to bear. And sometimes, paradoxically, that's exactly what makes it possible for us to heal. Mm-hmm. Exactly the moment that we stop trying to do that. But we have to give up. And I suppose this is also what you might mean by letting go, Lizzie. We have to give up on the idea that this will fix anything and start from a different place, which is how will I be present to myself, to others, to the world as it unfolds in this way that I often don't want it to. Yeah,
I think that bit about not wanting to change things, and we had this in one of our other talks about the kind of paradox of change that we were talking about. And I think it's so beautiful what you say, and Richard Rohr says about the sacredness of our wounds. Because as you're talking, I can feel this very thing that is the reason that I think I brought this, was that if we are in disconnect to our wounds, which by the way isn't possible, we're in reaction to what's gone down in our lives all the time. But if we're pretending that they're not there, or we're holding them in a kind of Pandora's box somewhere, never to be opened again, that box is like, it's funny, we were watching Jumanji the other day, and it's got this kind of board game in it that just kind of rattles and goes nuts until you open it, because there's something going on inside the box. And people think that if they bury the box, that box will not have any power anymore. But actually, the longer you keep the box buried, the more energy is within it, and the more it can blow open at any point with the perfect button that gets pushed, which is the little catch on the box. And turning towards those things it means that they don't have that kind of power anymore. They have a power that can participate in the world rather than be exiled from the world. And so these parts of us that are exiled, that we don't want to look at, and then for many of us, they come forth and we're like, well, I'm supposed to be happy. I'm supposed to be fine. I'm supposed to be, having a nice life. And actually, I feel the suffering all the time right now. And then because we don't get taught to move towards that suffering, we don't get taught to go and sit with the baby who's crying. We get taught to walk away and tell it to pull itself together and you deal with yourself on your own kind of thing. We're not taught to turn towards life so well. And so we end up thinking there's something wrong with us. And then there's something wrong with me narrative takes hold. And it's not even about that, really. It's about the thing that I've turned away from. And so it's funny how this turning towards thing feels like there's more and more in it every time it kind of gets mentioned in one of our conversations. I think, oh my gosh, another way that the turning towards feels so essential to this project that we've made and this conversation that we're always having. Because if we can find a way to turn towards our wounds, to turn towards the things that are difficult, to turn towards what it means to feel, to be sensitive, to have the kind of body and heart and mind that observes and sees and takes so much information in without pushing everything away. It's like the kind of contact that we can be, as you're saying, the kind of person we can be to others, with ourselves. The realms open up, the circle of possibility widens and widens and widens and deepens. And then we can be with the world rather than be in denial of it or in flight from it or defending against it. And that's a really different kind of human being that's possible.
When you were talking about turning towards in the way you were talking, and I had a couple of thoughts, Lizzie. One was that this has a lot to do with intimacy.
Yeah.
Which is, are we willing to be intimate with life? Are we willing to be intimate with our own experience and to be intimate with, which is to allow ourselves in close and also to make the move that human beings can make an intimacy when we care, which is, hello, you're welcome here. I'll hold you close. So that was one part of what was coming for me as you were speaking. So the other part of it was, and one of the reasons why I'm really grateful that we are sometimes having sources that come from some kind of theological background, whether it's Jewish or Catholic or Jesuit, all these different sources that we're bringing in, is the big mistake that we can make, whether or not whatever our own theology is to imagine that we were meant to be God. And you don't even have to think that there is such a thing as God to fall into this trap. I'm meant to be God. What that means is that I am meant to be able to make everything the way that I think it should be, and exactly as you were saying, and to the extent that I can't, I either have to fall into self-recrimination, self-judgment, and rage against myself and against everyone else that I didn't get to be this, or to throw my arms up in despair. And it so helps. I want to make a really strong recommendation for everyone to check out Richard Rohr and to read what he has to say, whatever your background is. So extraordinary. But one of the things the ways that he talks about this very often is nobody is God, one, and two is everyone is. Both are true simultaneously. So it's absolutely true that we have almost no power over almost everything that happens to us. And it's also true that together we have vast resources of creativity and aliveness and intimacy and care to bring to everything. And it's holding both of those without getting thrown into one end of the polarity that really helps us here.
Yeah. And I imagine also we each have tendencies in each of those different directions. Like some of us are really self-diminishing, i.e., oh, I'm definitely not God. And it helps at that moment to say, well, maybe I am. And other people, it's like, well, maybe, you know, a far more, the other end of the scale, I guess, is some kind of powerfulness, some kind of, a different kind of self-diminishment, actually, which is to think that I'm more than. And we all do it in both directions all the time. It's like watching the tendency and watching where I'm sitting at the moment. The other end of the polarity would help us. You know, and I think that's the beauty of polarities, is to kind of see what the gift of the other end is, might have for us in any given situation. And I also, Justin, it feels just burning to say something as well. We talk about the way that circumstances are kind of, in some way, we you know, we're thrown into circumstances. In some way, we're a kind of, if you like, a kind of victim of our circumstance. We find ourselves in something. And to look at the wounds of that is a really interesting, life-giving practice. To look at where things have been done to us and how that hurt us and how we felt powerless. But I also feel very passionately right now, and partly because of some of the coaching work that I'm doing, there are sometimes when we are the perpetrator. There are sometimes when we did something to other people, or we acted in a certain way that had us be unfaithful to something, or we betrayed something, we betrayed a trust, or we betrayed something. And that becomes our own self-inflicted wound that we can carry around for God knows how long, when we've done something bad, or, you know, we feel like we've done something that is outside of the acceptableness of our marriage or our society or our family or friends or something. And I feel like I want to include that as well in the kind of wounding too, because that feels like a really big deal, that I wasn't powerless, I was powerful, and I did this, and the consequences are awful. And can I forgive myself? Can I let go of all of the ways that I'm carrying this as a burden, in order for the gifts of what I did to arrive with me, just as the gifts of what my wounds inflicted by others on me might bring, even if I've been the perpetrator of the thing? Can I also forgive myself for having done that? And can I let myself off whatever hook I've got myself on that has me behave in certain ways that are in reaction to that as well? And that just feels like a really tender, I mean, I've been watching some stuff about prisons, and feeling into the kind of system of punishment that we have in our world, of you did this and therefore you get this, and therefore you are non-redeemable. And to feel into that kind of non-redemption narrative that we have when someone does something bad, and we don't do anything. As far as I can tell, I don't hear stories of rehabilitation every day. I hear people being in prison for a really long time, and it's a big topic, but everyone has got the same kind of vulnerability as me. They must do. You know, we all have feelings, and we all have childhoods, and we were all babies once. And that question of self-forgiveness and self-contact, given all the shame that would produce, because I was the one. It wasn't like I could say, well, my mum did it to me. So no, I did that to people. It is there all the time. And what do we do to address that hurt and that guilt and that awfulness of facing into the wounds that I've inflicted on myself and other people as well?
That's so beautifully said. And I think a topic for another week is beckoning.
Yeah.
Because it strikes me that what you just did was take this conversation about control and what we can and we can't control, and turn it towards what's already happened, including the actions that I've already taken. So one way to come into this question of forgiveness is forgiveness isn't saying it's all right that that happened.
Yeah.
It's not all right that I did that. It's not all right that I hurt somebody. It's not all right that I hurt myself. But there's also a way in which we do exactly what Richard Rohr is saying and inflict way more pain on others and on ourselves by trying to think that forgiveness would be, this didn't happen. I can only forgive when forgiveness is almost like trying to wipe away what's happened in the past. And that so clearly isn't what you're saying to me. It's honestly, lovingly, truthfully being close to what happened.
Yes.
So we don't have to keep on using it to eat ourselves or to eat other people.
Yes. So turning towards the thing and feeling and being with someone and ourselves so that we can turn towards that thing and really know what it feels like to feel remorse and feel the regret and to welcome and integrate the gifts of having done something that transgressed something sacred, like someone's dignity or someone's, something that's important to someone else, whatever that might be. The gifts of remorse and the gifts of sorriness are huge, but you won't ever get to receive the gifts from the thing that happened, whether they were wounds inflicted on you or you inflicted the wound. You will never get to feel the gift of those wounds and to have them be sacred if you don't get near them and be with them and learn to be in amongst whatever that feels like to receive from them. And I think that's the thing that Rich is talking about in transforming our pain, is that we get right close, impersonal, turning towards, and then really not only turning, but actually walking towards and standing in those things, because in there are gifts. And the more we turn away from them, the less we're receiving the, if you like, the curriculum that is ours to learn from in our lives.
I think it's a beautiful place for us to end.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for everyone for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
We're very lucky to get to do this. And please join us next week and tell people who you know and who you love about this project so that they can join us.
Mm.
We'll see you soon.